Hey there, and welcome back to Tim Talks. Today we are talking meatloaf-stuffed bell peppers. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees because you're going to love this recipe. Let's get started. Here are the ingredients I'm going to use to make this recipe today. But of course, if you have a favorite meatloaf recipe, go ahead and use that to stuff your peppers with. And watch the video to see how I go about doing this, because we're going to turn out some beautifully done, deliciously tender peppers with a lovely tender meatloaf on the inside. I start off here with a pound each of ground pork and ground beef. I also use a half a cup of Parmigiano Reggiano. This is the expensive Italian cheese. I really love this stuff. You don't need a lot of it. This has got a lot of flavor. It's also got a certain amount of salt. You want to take that into consideration when you're seasoning. Next, we've got about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste here. We're going to cook this with the onion. That's going to give it some really great flavor and intensify that. I've also got 2 whole eggs. I'm going to use half of this enormous Vidalia onion that I got on kind of discount at the grocery store the other day. Also about a half a cup of bacon bits. These are going to be really tasty in there. This is a 1/4 cup of basil pesto that I'm going to add. That's kind of oxidized on top. That's all right, nobody cares. Here we've got a half a cup of cubes of diet bread. This is that 35 calorie per slice diet bread you can get at the store. That's whole grain bread, by the way. I've also got a big tablespoon we're going to add of Dijon mustard, tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, obviously salt and pepper to taste, and we're going to toss in a little bit of Italian seasoning. I want to start by showing you the proper way to dice an onion. Here we've got this great big Vidalia onion. These are delicious. I'm going to slice this in half at the root end all the way through. And I'm going to set this half aside, because I'm not going to use it. I'm going to wrap that up for later. I'm going to cut off the top end, but we're going to leave the root end intact for right now. I'm going to peel back this first layer. It's usually pretty tough, and it's often difficult to cook into a really soft texture, so we're just going to pull that right off of there. Set that aside, and now we're going to dice this. Our goal here is to dice the onion into pieces that are pretty much the same size. Now, of course, we're not going to get them universally the same size, but we're going to do the best we can. I put my hand on top of the onion like this to stabilize it, and I'm going to cut through almost to the root end here a couple of times. And you can see it's kind of a Vegematic approach, only with a knife. And then I'm also going to slice it like this. I've got a little bit that falls up. That's not a big problem. Notice I'm slicing it with the tip of my knife, going almost all the way down to the root end there. That's going to help us hold it together while we do this. Now again, it never works out perfectly. There's always a few that fall out. We'll get them later. Hold your onion together like this and slice down, directly straight down. And you're going to get a fairly uniform dice for this whole big onion. It's also pretty quick. Before I knew this chef's technique, I used to cut onions in slices and dice the slices individually. It would take forever to do a big onion like this. Anyway, get down here. And when we get down to this root end, I tend to just sort of put it on its side. Using your knife often is about how to stabilize the product best so you don't cut yourself. There we go, that root end. Just save that for stock. And we got some pieces that are left over that are a little chunky. We're going to go ahead and get those. As I always do before sauteing onions, I've heated up my pan here over medium heat for about 3 minutes. Now I'm going to put some extra virgin olive oil in there, about 2 tablespoons or so. Maybe just a drop more. I'm going to heat that up, and you can see it's already starting to shimmer. Oh, and it's fragrant and lovely. You know I love the fragrance of fruity Spanish extra virgin olive oil. Make sure it's hot enough. We're just going to toss a couple of these in there. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. I'm going to go ahead and put them in the pan. And what we want to do here, if you've made meatloaf before, you know that if you don't saute your onions, they're going to remain a little crunchy through the cooking process. Some people really hate that. I'm not necessarily one of them, but I don't like it very much. And My husband really doesn't like it. I'm cooking for both of us. So here we go. I'm gonna let those go for a minute. While that's going on, I'm gonna add a little seasoning. How about a quarter teaspoon? Again, you want to go light on the salt because of the Parmigiano Reggiano, which is a very salty cheese we're gonna put in there. I'm also gonna add in some freshly ground black pepper. And I don't want to overdo it because we are going to be seasoning the other ingredients for the filling for the peppers here. We're going to saute these onions for about 5 minutes until they're soft and just beginning to turn golden. It's been about 5 minutes now, and you can see my onions are translucent and they're kind of golden here, partly because of the color of the olive oil, but also because their sugars are beginning to caramelize. I'm going to add in here my tomato paste. Again, that's about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And actually sauteing tomato paste in this way really intensifies its flavor, and it also cooks that raw tomato flavor. Even though tomato paste is not a raw product at all, it's been cooked for quite a while. That's how you get it into a paste. That smells just fantastic. I'm going to let that go for a little while. Here, you know, you got to cook with all your senses. I can smell here that the tomato is starting to roast and brown. It's a really wonderful flavor. And you know what? I've got one more ingredient I'm going to add. I didn't mention it earlier because I didn't realize I had it until I was in the refrigerator just a moment ago. And I've got about a ½ cup here of beef stock from an old pot roast. I'm going to add that in there and reduce it. This is really going to intensify the flavor of this dish. You could use, of course, any beef broth or pork broth. And the thing is, we don't want to add a bunch of liquid to our dish, so I'm going to bring this up to a boil and reduce it. Isn't that gorgeous? Let me tell you what, it smells beautiful too. It won't take long for this to reduce. You can also use, you could use some red wine, Merlot or Shiraz or something like that. Again, this is kind of an extra step. You don't have to do this, but this is going to taste really, really great in that filling. Now, if your question is, what do you mean by reduction? You can see here that the liquid has evaporated while I've simmered this. Well, I've got it on kind of a boil here. And the size of it is reducing. That's what we mean by a reduction. And this isn't quite there yet. Again, we don't want to add a lot of liquid to our meatloaf base because that's just going to make it sloppy. That's not what we want. So I'm going to let this go a little bit more, probably take about 5 minutes or so. And while this is happening, let's prepare our peppers. After washing your peppers thoroughly with running water, you want to slice off the very top part here, which you see is going to reveal the inside of the pepper. I use my knife to slice along the veins on the interior of the pepper, at least as far as I can go. I don't want to puncture the pepper though. If you do, it's okay, it's not a big deal. Just make it a little less pretty. And then I'm going to loosen this, and then just, I've got one more. Okay. Pull that out. I'm going to shake the seeds out of it. These ribs on the inside are a little bitter. They take up some room too. We want to get rid of them. I'm just going to pinch those out of there. And see, now you can see we pretty much got a nice clean pepper. Now back to our filling. Here I've got the pound of ground pork and pound of ground beef. I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients to it. Here's that reduction. Check that out. Not bad, right? It's pretty thick. You can see it's kind of ketchup consistency. I'm going to stick it all in there. I've let it cool a little bit. It's not crucial that you do that because it will cool down as it comes in contact with the meat here. It's not going to cook anything. But the thing is, we're going to mix this with our hands, so we don't want to be too hot. Okay. Next, I'm going to add in the bacon bits, the pesto. Look at that on the other side. See it just oxidized a little bit. That's some gorgeous pesto. I wish I had made a video of the pesto from my garden. Really a very nice thing. Our Parmesan cheese, about a ½ cup, as I think I mentioned. Get that in there. That is a really great flavor. You could use regular Parmesan cheese. I would buy the most flavorful kind I could get. Of course, here we've got our breadcrumbs. That's a half a cup of breadcrumbs. And we're also going to add in a few other flavorings here. I want to add in, stick that there so it'll stand up, just a little bit of Italian seasoning. The basil of the pesto is going to be nice. Let's put some other flavors in the background of that. You'll notice I didn't add any garlic separately, but that's because of the quarter of cup of basil pesto, which has plenty of fresh garlic in it. Here's a nice blob of Dijon mustard, about a tablespoon. Looks like we're about at the end of my bottle of mustard there, right? Okay. I'm going to add as well about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Don't want to overdo it. It's a very strong flavor, but it's one that goes really well with this kind of meat. Here are my 2 eggs that I've beaten up. And as always, we're going to season with just a little bit of salt, probably about a quarter of a teaspoon, and some freshly ground black pepper. Okay, now we've got to mix this up. I want to get everything thoroughly incorporated in there. And the best way to do that with meatloaf, as you probably know if you've made a meatloaf before, is to use your hands. Now, if you're squeamish about doing this, you might want to just brave it. It's really not that bad. But if you really don't want to touch it with your hands, you could, of course, put gloves on, or you could use any utensil that you like. Again, it's going to take you a little while. You don't want to put this in a food processor, because if you overmix it, the meat will become tough. You don't want that. Everything we've done here, well, or about half of the steps we've taken here, have been to make sure the meat is tender, as well as really flavorful. I'll tell you what, the combination of flavors I've got in here smell great already. And here, oops, get a little bit over the side of the bowl there, that's all right. That's really probably about enough. Well, maybe smooth it out a little bit. I'm seeing some chunks of ground meat that aren't incorporated well. You want to do this just enough to get that incorporated. I think that's pretty good right there. Okay, I think we're ready to stuff our peppers now. Let me show you here how to stuff a pepper. Here you can see it's got that nice big cavity in there. We're going to take our stuffing and I'm spooning it in there with my spatula. Pushing it down as far as I can into the bottom of the pepper. We want to avoid an air pocket there, mostly because it could be filled with this meat filling. Get the rest of that in there. See, there's really nothing to it at all. And now we're ready to put these into a baking vessel. I prepared this glass baking dish by putting about a half a cup, 3/4 of a cup of my best ever keto pizza sauce in there. And now I'm going to put the peppers in. I'm just going to stick a couple of these in here, crowd them right on in. I'm going to alternate the color just to make it pretty. Push them down in there. And this recipe makes 6, so I'm going to use the smaller pan. This is just a bread loaf pan. And I'm going to put the last 2 in there. Actually, I'm going to cook these 2 today. The other 4, I'm going to cover with foil and put in the freezer for another day. My oven's preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to cover these with foil for the first phase of the baking, which is going to take about 45 to 50 minutes. We'll be back when that's done. Well, the timer went off, so I pulled these out, and let's fold back the foil and see how we're doing here. Off to the side. Oh yeah, looking great. Now what we're going to do is put a slice of provolone cheese. You could also use grated mozzarella cheese if you like, or any other cheese that you like. Of course, this is your recipe. I'm going to put a slice of provolone cheese over the top of each one. I'm going to stick them back in the oven for 15 more minutes at 400. My timer's just gone off. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah, beautiful. Check this out. Here we go. Look at that. These are really beautiful. They're caramelized on top and just really, really lovely. These are ready to plate up. Aren't those gorgeous? How's that for an attractive plate for lunch? Check this out. Let's give it a, go ahead and get in there and give it a taste. You can see it's cooked all the way through. And doesn't the meatloaf in there look tender and juicy and lovely? Served with a side salad of spinach and some mushrooms. I got some bacon bits in there, a little olive oil, salt and pepper, and some aged sherry vinegar. I'm going to serve this as well with a side of some of my keto pizza sauce. You can of course use any red sauce that you like. Let's give this a taste. Slices very nicely. I can tell that the pepper is perfectly soft and lovely. Get a little sauce going on with that. Oh yeah. Yeah, that is really, really quite good. That will do. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us again today on Tim Talks. We will see you next time.